If there's one thing that you can do to mess up your Power Apps project or any software project for that matter, is not to design the database properly. To just jump in Power Apps and just start working with, let's say, a big spreadsheet worth of data. Um, there is no easier way to ruin a project than to do that. One of the projects that I've showcased here on this channel is about a checklist inspection application for a company that installed hardware on law enforcement vehicles. Let me just show you this spreadsheet that they gave me. And this might be possible, a similar project that you might get. You're presented with a spreadsheet. I'm going to make myself smaller here so we can look at this better. Hey, Kurt.
Hey.
And what we have on the screen here is a spreadsheet. A lot of times you're presented with a spreadsheet and like, hey, make this into a Power Apps app. And so that was the case with this project. It was my first freelance project with Power Apps. And like, yeah, just build me a single screen application. And if you look at this spreadsheet, you'll notice we've got customer information, we've got car information, and then here's all the checklist inspection. And in the customer's mind, he could not wrap his mind around the possibility of this being more than just one screen, one database table. And I'm here to show you guys how we can improve our Power Apps projects by designing our databases first. Have it at the forefront of your mind as we go through this. So what I recommend to people, is like, hey, don't open up Power Apps yet. Make sure you design the database. And what you want to end up doing is getting a description of the application. And usually somebody will try to get you on a Zoom call and be like, I need an app that does this, and this. And what you want to do is identify the entities in the project requirements that are a person, place, thing, or an idea, like a noun. And then what you want to do is identify all the data points for each of those. What do you think, Kurt?
Yeah, I think so.
Very good.
Whenever you say the word entity, I'm thinking you need to explain what that is, because there's probably people that don't understand that. Apart from the person, place, or thing, like in the tech world, what's that mean? Like, to me, an entity is a table. It could be the actual database itself. Tables, fields, the data points are fields, right? So they're the different pieces. But generally, in a developer world, an entity means a table, right? Most of the time. Sometimes it could be like if you're dealing with an object-oriented programming, it could be a model where you have classes that are going to create objects from that class, and so the entity would be the actual class. But really, if you think about it, a table is a class in itself too. It's a model, because you got rows and columns, you got fields, and you're going to be addressing that information. So yeah, whenever I see the word entity is a really good professional term that is used that covers a lot of things, So if you're just getting into this database world and programming world, I just kind of want to talk about that a little bit. So hopefully I didn't steer you off the beaten path on that one too much.
No, I mean, when I first worked with you, Kurt, I was really excited about programming. I'm like, when are we going to write some games? And like, no, Darren. Database is where it's at. I'm like, well, that's not as fun as writing a game. And what you told me was like, Darren, if you can read a record, write a record, you can get a job anywhere. Any business has to deal with data. And in fact, I think you went on to explain to me, well, even games have databases. So just talking about entities, well, we could have, let's talk about Pac-Man. Does everybody know what Pac-Man is? Or am I getting a little too old for an example like that?
There used to be a time when everybody would know what Pac-Man is, but nowadays maybe not so much, right?
Yeah. So
hey, Joshua. Sorry. Just want to say hi to Joshua real quick.
Yeah. You know, in Pac-Man, you've got you know, a score, which is probably a property of the player. Um, you know, how many lives. Um, you know, there's all kinds of different things, different parallels that can be drawn there. So,
Yeah.
so go ahead.
I was just agreeing with what you were saying.
Yeah.
I guess real quick, how I got started in programming. I remember back in the day, I was working at this place and the place was getting ready to close, and I was thinking, I need to learn something. I need to learn something. I need to do something with my life, right? So there were three things. There were word processors, there were spreadsheets, and there were databases when it came to business. Those three
Hmm.
things. And I said, so now I need to learn one of those three things. Now, which one's going to be the best one? I sat there and I thought about it for a long time, like weeks. And WordPerfect. Back in those days, you had Lotus 1, 2, 3, and you had DBase 3. And I
Hmm.
said, you know what? I'm going to learn databases because hospitals have it, schools have it, data. And I guess I just thought that was the thing. Everybody has to do data. So that's what made me think about learning something really good. So I did. I delved into that and learned that database stuff, and it just turned out that it was an important thing. you know,
Yeah, you're not kidding.
yeah, yeah. Anyway,
And
so
in a way, guys, as you learn how to do database applications, you organize things with relational data, you become an agent of order in a sea of business chaos.
yeah, yeah,
As someone I know would say, be the adult in the room, and to lead
yeah.
people in the way it's like, okay, well, you have a bunch of data here. Let's make some sense of this. And you will look at, and if I can get the screen to cooperate with me here. Um, you've got all kinds of information going on here. We need to identify the entities. So up here we've got customer information, car information, and then inspection type of information. And for some reason, sometimes in the business world, we just like to lump everything together.
Mhm.
Look at this spreadsheet here. We've got customer's full name, customers' cars. Oh, this guy Kurt, he's got 2 trucks. This age column, it's got all kinds of information. We've got
The trucks are older than dirt, right? Right.
the trucks are older than dirt.
Yeah, the trucks are
Mhm.
older than dirt.
Let's see here. So my Mazda Speed 3 is middle aged, it looks like, and Mary's red Ford Mustang it's probably on the edge of being a classic car, right? Anything over 22 years for a car is considered classic.
And we established that. That's me too. I'm on the edge of being a class. I'm a classic. I'm not old. Kurt, you're not old. You're a classic.
I like it.
I like it. So, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you're going to be confronted with this type of information all the time. And just this week, we had a workshop on data,
Mhm.
and we went through all the normalization rules 1 through 5, and we talked about data redundancy, all kinds of different things. So I'd like to a few examples of some data. And Kurt, you presented quite the example yesterday. Let me try to bring up
The example
Notepad.
of a hot mess that you typically get into, right?
That's right. Here's Notepad. Okay, that's good. And let me go get something here. So let's say Kurt brought in a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet was called Customer Sales Inventory. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in on this so we can look at this here. What all do we
Yeah,
have here?
those were the columns of the spreadsheet.
Yeah, there we go. So what I do when I look at data like this is, okay, here's store ID. Well, that's a piece of information about what? A store. Okay, account ID. Well, that's an ID of what? An account. Okay. So perhaps we could create another. let's identify the entities out of this. So I'm going to try to bring up another instance of Notepad if it allows me to. And I'm going to try to do this and that. There we go. So I see a store, an account, I see customer. And then, okay, so here's more information about a store. There's more information about a customer, perhaps last name, first name. But right now, I just want to identify the entities. Salesperson. Okay. So let's put that in there. We have a purchased item. Now that might beg the question, should we have an entity called item, whether it was purchased or not? Okay, that looks like, okay, that's all one. Purchased item sales commission percentage. What was that?
And of course, in the spreadsheet, you're going to see purchased item. That's what you'll see in the column of the spreadsheet, right? So you have no idea what that really is over there. Yeah.
So when you're working with people and like, oh, hold on. There's a purchased item. What about the unpurchased items? So let's maybe just put item there, and then we've got sales commission. Well, we got salesperson. Sales commission might actually be something separate, couldn't it, Kurt?
It could be, or it could be attached to the salesperson or the item. You'd have to probably look at the business rules for that, right?
Here's a purchased item ID. Okay. Oh, a store. Okay, here we already have store address, store phone number, store URL, purchased item serial number.
Yeah, of course they're never grouped together, right? The fields are never, or the columns are never grouped together so that you can say, oh, this is all for the store stuff and this is all for that. It's all spread out across each record, you know?
Okay, store picture 1, store picture 2. Perhaps we'll have something out here called pictures, maybe.
Sounds good to me.
Just want to do some brainstorming with you guys, you know. And so there's a salesperson. Well, we already have a salesperson. So that's what I always try to do when I'm looking at some type of requirements or somebody's telling me about a program they need written. What are the entities? And when they start talking about this, I'm like, okay, well, what is it that you need the application to track for the store or for the account or for each of these things? And you're going to come up with things like IDs and first names, last names, address, city, state, zip, phone, email, all this type of stuff. And those become fields within your database tables.
And also known as data points, right?
Yeah.
Those would be data points.
Absolutely. So I have, let's see, an ERD diagram. Let's create a diagram with that example. I'm going to bring this back up and put up on this screen so I can easily see it. So I do see customer. I don't need card. Let's just create a new diagram. And I'll make it public so everybody can get to it. And we'll call this Kurt's mess.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got store. ID. Everything will have an ID, right? Then we've got an account. Customer.
Just looking over at the messages and comments. We got Patty and Michelle. Good morning. Good morning, guys. Francisco, good morning. Data's King says data dictionary. That's an old term that doesn't get used a lot anymore, is it? The data dictionary. Right. Used to be that was the first thing you have to go for is build your data dictionary. Now you say data dictionary, and they're like, "What's that?"
Salesperson. We got a sales commission. I don't think commission's got two M's in it, does it? It does. Yeah. Well, we don't like spaces under table names, right?
No.
And then we've got items. Sort of reminds me of the old Northwind database.
Yeah.
What are kind of the rules for when you're creating your names for your tables? Is it camel case? Is it, what are the rules for naming conventions?
That's probably the hardest thing to do within the IT world is knowing how to name things.
Naming things. It's so hard.
Yeah, I almost want to bring up this thing that I saw the other day. But to answer your question, sometimes it comes down to preference. Sometimes it comes down to what the database administrator of the organization, the DBA, if you have one. But SE Shell says, be consistent. However you do it, be consistent. Does that make you proud, Kurt?
Thank you, Michelle. That is, I don't care what you're doing. Be consistent in your naming, in your programming. If you're developing apps, be consistent. If you indent 3 spaces in every control structure, do it everywhere. Be consistent. Good stuff. Is that how you spell consistent? Yeah. Just checking you, Michelle. Just checking you. I can't even spell consistent, right?
No spaces in kind. So let's talk about this. This is a great question, Joshua. So me personally, I like proper casing, and there have been times where if I'm the only person in the database, designing the database or interacting with that database, I might use a preference to prefix the table names. If you look at the playlist that I have here on YouTube on building a work order system for a garage, I prefixed every table with TBL. And I saw that back in the days of Access. A lot of times you'd see the table prefix with TBL. What I do like about that is over in Power Apps, I just type TBL and then I'm presented with a whole list of all my tables. I really like that. But this is probably the way that I've seen it mostly is like proper casing, and the first letter of each word is capitalized, no spaces, no dashes. Sometimes I'll see old school DBAs will make everything uppercase, just like they would do. They would write SQL statements. It'll be all in uppercase, and any spaces would be replaced with underscores. And I think that looks a little ugly, but I guess if that's how you do it all the time and it's consistent in your organization, it just is the way that you do it there, you know. Right. So we've got all these different entities, and we'll have data points for each one, and then we'll need some way of relating the data. Okay. So I would say just looking at all this stuff, we've got store, customer, we got items to sell. What about a sales table? So in order for a sale to occur, we would have the customer would be customer ID, and that would go over to this table here, one to many. And we might have a salesperson that was involved here. So we'll say salesperson ID. Now, an account, Kurt, in your example, I'm almost thinking of Amazon, where I have an Amazon account, and then everybody in my household could use that account. Is that sort of what you were thinking with that?
It could be that. Just it, it could be like maybe like a Sam's Club, I think, does something like that as well.
That's true.
Places where you
Oscar.
have, an account can have a lot of different customers in it, but then maybe you've got an account with your family and then an account with your business, so
Okay.
so you would have a different customer base based on that.
Stuff around here a little bit. Okay. So I've seen lots of stores set up like that. Like you mentioned, Sam's Wholesale Club. There's a place called, at least here in Florida, called BJ's, and they're almost just like one of those. Also, Costco is another popular one that does memberships like this. And we might have different stores. So this account, you can go to any store that they have out there.
Yeah.
But a sale will happen at a store. So let's go ahead and add a store ID. I did not mean to create another table there. I meant to create a store ID.
This is quite a large. It could turn into quite a large data.
It can.
And it's a pretty common one too. I did one for the Army back in the old days. Some of you guys have been in the Army back in the maybe 80s and 90s. They used to have these things called the self-help service centers or the You Do It centers, where if you were in the Army base, you'd be able to go in there and check out items. Basically buy stuff, and it was almost a license to steal. You had to have some kind of accountability in there, right? So I wrote a program for the Army that set that all up, and it was similar to this, very similar to this.
Oh, like that.
I don't even know if they still have them like that.
What's that?
I don't even know if the Army still has You Do It centers or self-help service centers. Well, I know they could still be using my program. I don't know.
Okay. I've seen some stores that I've heard of, like an Amazon store with like a physical brick and mortar. And you just walk in and you scan your ID or you scan something, and then you just pick it up, put it in a basket and walk out, and it just charges you for it.
Yeah.
So, if we have a sale happen, typically you want to account for someone ordering more than, purchasing more than one item, right? So we have the items over here, but we might need to have a table called sale items or sale item level, item detail, line item, sale line item. Let's do that. And a line item would have an ID, an item ID here. And then over here, we'd have a sale ID. What's that?
So you're going to be keeping track of sales. That'd be this is when you step up to the checkout counter right here. That's your point of transaction, right? And then the sales line item would be all the items that you put on the counter to be checked out, right? And then the item would be the items that are stored in the back there in the warehouse. That's our inventory.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff. Okay.
So recognize, guys, we haven't really put a lot of fields in these tables. We're just establishing primary keys, foreign keys. So if you have, a table here, and you've got an ID that points to an ID, a primary key in another table, that's a foreign key. Mm-hmm. So,
do you still have the hot mess that
I sure
could
do.
we look at that real quick? Yeah. So I think we've got there should be like an is consumable item towards the bottom. I thought I saw in there. Is consumable, purchased item is consumable. And then we've got non-consumable issue date, non-consumable item due date. So probably we need to make sure that we've got a serial number database that's going to keep track of certain inventory, right? So that might be attached to your item table.
Okay. Some type of like a barcode scan number.
Yeah.
Those.
So right. Think about how you might have, like, if you remember, you used to go to stores and you used to see carpet cleaners, or some of these places you can rent lawnmowers, you can rent carpet cleaners, things like that are we call those non-consumable items. They're the items that are going to leave the store and come back. So you need a way of tracking that.
So give me an example. Are you talking like a rental, something that
Yeah.
comes back to the store?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly right. It's that, some stores offer ability to rent things as well.
It's consumable. And then let's say the price.
Yeah.
Very good. All right, well, let's talk about database normalization rules. We touched on that during the workshop. And generally speaking, there are 5 levels of normalization. You might find some more and different names of different levels of normalization. So I'd like to sort of step through the rules of database normalization. And there's a lot of benefits to creating a well-designed database schema. Okay. So if you have a good database schema, it makes it easier to understand. It's easier to enhance and extend it. You minimize ambiguity. And I would say you'd avoid different types of danger. What are examples of danger? You could have duplicate or redundant data. You could have orphan data. Let's say we've got a bunch of sales out here, and then we deleted the customer that came in every week for the past 10 years. Well, if you delete that customer, you've got all kinds of orphan data.
Well, you can also design yourself into a corner, right, with it. For instance, just the way we just talked about it right there, because you had this already set up. Let's say we did this in not the way you just did it here, and we finished the thing, and then somebody said, "Yeah, but you know what? We've got consumable items at this store. How are we going to deal with the rental stuff?" Well, the way you designed this, it was nothing for you just to hang that off of there. Now you can hang a table off of there, put a field in there, and you're done. You're ready to go, because the way you set this up, this is designed. The way you design this table, it's set up for expansion. There's no place in here where you cannot expand from it. If you look at these pieces, you could add anything. You could hook a table to any of these items right here, and it would make sense.
Yeah. So Jordan, in the comments, recommended quantity, and I would agree with that. So you pick
I
up
want
a
that
bar
over
of
there in
soap,
the item property too, in the item table too.
the quantity over there. So for example, an item, we could pick up a 6-pack of root beer, right? So maybe they come with
That quantity would be quantity in stock, right? The item.
Okay. Quantity in stock.
Yeah.
Very good.
I think our hot mess table had a vendor thing too, so you might want to deal with supplier tables in there too.
So we've got a vendor that creates items, like a supplier. Is that right?
Yeah.
Vendor. And over here in item, we could have a vendor ID.
Yeah. And you might have more than one vendor. Maybe the store has 3 or 4 different suppliers for certain things, for each thing. So they could go out there and they could say, well, where do we go to get that? And if that person's out, then they can go to the next one, you know?
Ah,
So you could
okay.
have a vendor item mapping table.
Okay. So let's talk about a specific example of maybe water, bottles of water.
Sure.
Let me try. Oh, here we go. Delete the relationship. Okay, so we got vendor. We have an item here, and we would have a vendor items, and then we would have a foreign key vendor ID. We'd also have item ID here.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so what we have here, we have an item that could be provided by more than one vendor, and a vendor could supply more than one item. So we essentially have a many-to-many relationship between these two tables,
Yeah.
which we've accomplished with a table in the middle we call a mapping table or a junction table. All right, so let's actually show how we would create these tables in different formats here, okay?
Good stuff. Yeah.
So I'd like to just focus on 2 tables if we can, just to make things really simple. We'll see how we would create it in each data source. So I'm thinking,
Oh, you know what? We need one more thing in your diagram. I'm
yeah,
sorry. Just looking over here at the account customer, I wasn't really paying attention. You need to have a mapping table, I think, in there because you could have one account can have many customers and one customer can have many accounts, right?
okay,
So we need to have a mapping table in there too.
yeah. I'd like to focus in on,
Okay.
let's just say 2 tables as we create this in the different data sources here. So I think sales is like a central table here. So let's maybe create salesperson, store, maybe customer and sales. So how would we do this? SharePoint. I'm going to bring up a SharePoint here. And we have a SharePoint site. I'm going to go into site contents. And do we already have a customer? We do. So let's go in and look at this customer and see what we have here. Oh, okay. We've got an ID. We got a first, last name, phone, email, notes. Okay. So we'll leave that there. And let's go look and see if we've got a sales table. These 2 tables here. We do not. Okay, so we'll create a new table here, a blank list. Say sales. Now we could really simplify this whole scenario, if we say somebody comes in and they just buy one thing at a time, one sale is one item, you might think that would be weird. Well, it would be for like grocery store or Amazon, something like that. But if you think about a car dealership, typically somebody will come in and buy one car, rather than come in and like, yeah, I need a whole fleet of cars. So that might be a good example to use for this use case. We have a sale. Typically what I like to do when I'm designing my data in SharePoint, I always like to see that primary key, that ID, put that front and center there. Okay. And then we would add a number here that would be the customer ID. Okay. So Darren is number one, Kurt's number two. I'm gonna go create a new sale, and we'll say Ford Mustang purchased, customer ID is one. And Kurt, you're gonna go in and purchase a truck. What type of truck would you like to buy today?
I want a Chevy
Right? Chevy
Silverado.
with no problems with the starter.
No problems with the starter. Oh boy, don't talk about starters.
We'll get you a brand new one. And so we'll put the customer number of 2 in there. Okay. Let's go back and look at our ERD diagram. We've got a customer and we've got a sale. Now we could go in and say what the total price is. And we'll make this price number. It's good for me. Let's say, I don't know how much a new Ford Mustang would be, but let's put it at 35,000 maybe. I don't know. I could be really off on that. How much is the new Chevy Silverado?
Oh my goodness. Maybe 60,000.
My goodness.
70,000. Yeah.
Let's go with the base model.
I seen it. My next door neighbor just bought one, and it was like $105,000 for one of those 2,500 HDs. Yeah. I mean, it's nice, but oh
Yeah.
boy. He said that. I said, oh. Isn't that crazy? I remember time. I think my dad bought a car when I was a kid for like $700, brand new off the lot. You can't imagine. You can't imagine, right?
Yeah.
It's funny.
All right. So what does this look like in Dataverse? Does it look drastically different, Kurt, in Dataverse?
A little bit different. A
Yeah?
little bit, but not too bad. I mean, in the end, it's all rows and columns, right?
That's right.
So I guess I do want to talk about that just a little bit.
Sure.
It seems
please
like
do.
people get really hung up on the different data sources. Like, well, okay, I've been doing SharePoint for a long time. Well, how do I do Dataverse? Oh, it's got to be so hard. It's really the same. It's really the same. The data types might be just a little bit different. There is this lookup thing that we need to demonstrate how you can do, but really it's essentially the same thing. The ID, instead of using the ID, you're going to be using a lookup column. So, I mean, there's differences, but they're the same, right? So I guess I just want to take some of that mystery away from people. And really, even in SQL Server, you get into the designer of SQL Server, and it's essentially the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd like to show that as well. The 3 different examples.
Yeah.
Now we already do have a customer table. And I sort of like to show this from scratch. So I'm going to go into, I'm going to say new table, and I'll say set advanced properties.
And I'll be right back there.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. So I will create a new table called my customer. And the only reason why I'm putting the prefix my on there is because I already have a table, and I want to show you how I would create this from scratch in Dataverse. Okay. So within Dataverse, you want to give it a singular name, okay? And it will try to pluralize it by putting an S on the end. And on the primary column, it wants to create a column called name. And you might think to yourself, oh, this is going to be the primary key column. It actually calls it a primary column, but it's really not. And you'll see why it's not here in just a moment. So inside the SharePoint will try to create a column called title. And then over here in Dataverse, it'll try to create a column called name. And I just let it do its thing. I'll leave it just as is. Hit save. Look at that. We already have a table called my customer. Okay. Let's call this, let's give it a prefix here. Example customer, example customers. This is the uh, one of the downsides with Dataverse is that, let's say within an environment, you've got a one-to-one relationship between a Power Apps environment and a Dataverse database. So sort of wanted to create a something fresh and new, but because we already have tables there, and you also have Dynamics 365 tables in there as well. So there's already a table called users. Um, so that's something to sort of keep in mind. If you create a new project, you might want to prefix all your tables in Dataverse. That sort of identifies the project. Okay. Let's say example customer, example customers, and I'll hit save. It just takes a moment, and then it's created. Okay. So I'll go ahead and enter a little bit of data here. I'll say Darren, and we'll also say Kurt. Okay. Now let's go create a new table for sales. So this table will be called sale. And there's a chance that there's already a table out there with that name. We'll see what happens here. Oh, looks like it's fine. Now, in order to do this, customer and a sale, we got this customer ID that points over here. That's how we did it in SharePoint. Okay. But over here, what we're going to do, we're going to create a new column. But instead of creating a number here, what we're going to do is I'm going to call this customer. Well, and I'm going to make this it's going to be a lookup. In my opinion, lookup column, you can have a lookup column in SharePoint, but it's not a good thing to use for a Power Apps application. So SharePoint's been out for a long time. It's over 20 years now, and it wasn't designed with Power Apps in mind. Whereas Dataverse was created and designed to be used within the Power Platform. Okay. So that's why lookup column is actually a good thing. That's how you establish a relationship between tables. Okay. And I'm going to go down here and type in example. Well, nope, it's only allowing me to do one character at a time, it looks like. Example. And this is a weird thing that you might come in contact with Dataverse, because we just created that other table. Okay, so is it really out there? I called it example, and I don't see it. So I'm going to back out, and I'm going to do a refresh on this page. And now I'm going to try it again. A new column. This will be customer lookup. And it's going to be lookup and Down here, I'll type example. You see that? Now we can see it. Save. Okay. Now, for every table that's created in Dataverse, what you have is a column name that's the exact same name as the table. So I should be looking for, if I want to look at the primary key, I'm going to make sure that's visible here. Okay. Now it's grayed out because it's going to provide the value for us. It's going to be a GUID or a unique, globally unique identifier. So I'm going to go in here and say Ford Mustang GT. And then over for the customer lookup, look what we have here. It understands this is a lookup. And I would just select a customer here. Okay. And over here, we've got a Chevy Silverado. Double click here, select Kurt. Okay. So do you guys see what we have? We have we have got 2 records and we're looking at these 3 fields. Now, if we go back over to the example customer, okay, we'll open this up and we'll look at this. So we've got Darren and Kurt. But remember what I said is that we do have a column here of the same name as the table, example customer. So bring that in and you'll notice that each customer will have a GUID. And that GUID is actually what's stored over in that other table underneath the scenes. Okay. So that's how you would do that in Dataverse. Now,
So now, Darren, if you take that back over to the SharePoint, that would be the same thing as your ID field with a auto incrementing number, right?
that's right.
But instead of that ID number sitting over there, it's actually a GUID with the same name as your table.
Yes. Absolutely.
Very nice.
So that's the biggest difference between something like SharePoint and something like Dataverse. Well, how would we do this in SQL Server? So I do have a nearly blank database here. So I'm going to create a new table. Let's see how we do this in SQL Server here. So we could have an ID. We can make it an integer. And if you look at these properties here, how you create an automatically generated number, an integer, is to use an identity field. So we've got this ID field selected. We made it an integer. And down here you see identity specification. And I'm going to double click and this is going to switch it over to yes. And there's the increment. It's going to go up by 1 and it's going to start at the number 1.
I love it.
Well, let's say we don't want people to let's say a new customer does business with us. Like, okay, you're customer 1. They're going to look at you like, really? I'm your first customer? Maybe you don't want to have to answer that question. So you want to say, start off with 5,000 or let's say 5,000. And let's say it always goes up in increments of 5. So somebody says, yeah, my customer ID is 134. Well, that's impossible, sir, because all of our customer numbers are divisible by 5.
I like that.
You like that?
Yeah. But the vanity of it all, right? It's funny. But what I like about this now, so really, essentially, you can make SQL Server look just like SharePoint, or make it look just like Dataverse. But the secret is in SQL Server, you make it look like you have more control in SQL Server over everything. SharePoint, it puts that ID number every time it creates a record. It puts that in there. Yeah. Dataverse, every time it creates a record, it puts that GUID in there. SharePoint, you tell it to put that in there.
You mean SQL Server?
I'm sorry, SQL Server. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. You tell it to put it in there. I love the beauty of that. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I love creating a new table and not seeing any columns, you know?
Exactly.
How many columns does SharePoint create for you that you didn't even ask for? Probably about like 15. How many does Dataverse create? About 15, maybe 20. Because you got
Right.
created by, created when it was created by,
Oh,
modified. You've got all kinds of stuff in there.
yeah, it's it's terrible when you have to go into the name field and in your column when you're creating columns and do a filter on it so that you can see what you made versus what it got made for you. So that's not,
Yeah.
It's nice to be able to do that.
So if this is going to be our customer, let's put in here first. Whoops. First name. Last name. Varchar 50.
So, but then when you're creating stuff like in SQL Server, because one of the things I wanted to talk about was how we took the mystery away from the difference between SharePoint and Dataverse. And then when you jump over to SQL Server, you see you got more flexibility, you got more control, way more control. But with that flexibility and with that control comes a little bit of a learning curve, just a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit of a hurdle to get over. And of course, more responsibility,
Yeah, absolutely. So we got first, last name, we have that ID. Now, what you also want to do if you're over here in SQL Server creating this primary key, what you want to do is go up to the top. You see a little key up there on the toolbar. We want to click on that. That is a toggle. So I've got ID selected. I'm going to click on that. And now I see a little key over here. Okay. So in order for you to have a database table that's in first normal form, you need to have a primary key in there that will uniquely identify a record. I'm going to hit save, and now it's going to ask me for a table name. So I'll say customer. So we've got that. And over here on the tables, you'll notice that I don't see my new table. So a lot of times, I got to go over here and refresh if things are changing. Now we see customer. Now let's create a new table called sales. Okay, so we might want to have an ID here as well of type integer. And set up the identity to yes. Click on that ID, click on the key that creates the primary key there. And we'll say item purchased. And that will be an integer, perhaps, or I guess what we should stay true to what we were doing before, which is we've got like the name of a car. Okay, so we'll say varchar 255. Now we need a customer ID. We'll make that an integer. Okay, I'll save this, and here we'll call it customer. It already exists. I'm sorry, I meant to say sale. There we go. There's the sale table. And I'm going to refresh my tables here on the side. Now, the beauty of using SQL Server, this is my favorite part, so I can go into diagrams here and create a new diagram of all of our tables, or maybe just a subset of our tables. I'm not interested in model right now. I just want this customer and sale. I'm going to add these two to the database diagram.
This is a great interface.
It is.
Most of the time when it comes to, I'm one of the guys that like to do dot prompts. I like to be able to just type my stuff in. I don't like interfaces very much. Like when we were back in DBase 4, I don't like messing with the interface in SharePoint and in Dataverse. I wish there was a dot prompt for those where you could just type in commands to make things happen. But I really like using this interface. This is a nice interface because you can actually create tables within here. Isn't that nice?
It is nice.
Yeah.
So I could, as you just said here, Kurt, say new table. And I could say something like line item. Hit OK. What does it give us? Oh, allows us to create our columns now.
Look at that.
And I can go over here and say int. I can press F4 to get my properties and set this up as an identity.
Now, can you set a key in here too?
So this is for the table itself. I wanted to click on the. Let me see.
Okay.
There's identity. And what were you asking about, Kurt?
Can you set a key in there, like set that as a primary key for the table as well?
Yeah, you should be
Within there, or do you
just
just go back up?
moving things around a little bit. So I'll click on ID again. And I always like to click on this little key up there, but are you asking about this over here on the side?
Yeah. Okay.
Go alphabetically.
Sorry about that. Our dog is really angry at a fan.
Oh yeah.
The fan's going. It's just going crazy. It thinks it's a person or something. I don't know.
But for a line item, we might have the sale ID here with an integer. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and save this. Now it's asking for a diagram name. And I'm going to say the main diagram. Naming things is so hard in IT, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, these tables look a little different. Well, if I right click on this, I can go down to column names and it's going to look like these two. It's a little too wide for my taste there. So, but let's work with this relationship here. How do we establish a relationship? We've got a customer ID, which is meant to be a foreign key. Well, I'm going to do what I did with Draw SQL is I'm going to drag on that column, and then I'm going to go to the primary key of the other table and then release. And it gives me two modal dialog boxes here. And SQL Server is like, you're telling me that the primary key over a customer lines up with this customer ID in sale. And I just click OK. Yeah, that is what I meant to do. And it's going to create a database object, a foreign key constraint. Okay, and that's what it's going to name it. And I'm fine with that. I'm going to click OK. And you see you got a little infinity symbol there. So one customer can come in and buy things over and over again.
Now, I want to pause just a second there. Just go back up. When you say constraint, you're talking about basically a business rule. That's another name for a business rule, which means rules in your database. Like you could actually, a constraint might be initializing any new record field with the value true. If it's a true false type Boolean, you could say, I'm going to initialize it whenever they're creating a new record. I want that to be true. That would be a constraint. In this case, you're saying a foreign key. This means the constraint is that this is going to be, we're allowing duplicates in this. And because it's a foreign key, it's a key, but we're allowing duplicates in it. Yep.
Yeah. So for any sale, we want to have an ID that actually exists over here. And you see we've got a key there. That's the one side, and the infinity symbol or the 8 on its side is the many side.
Yeah.
And we could do that again here. Here's the sale ID. I'm going to drag that over to the ID of sale, release, and I'm going to click OK. Okay. And there we go. So you guys have seen an example of how we would create tables in SharePoint and Dataverse and now SQL Server.
Yep. Yep. Now, one of the other pain points I think I hear a lot of people when they're kind of new to data, especially to Dataverse, is how you actually patch a record from a one to many. Like we create a new record. Let's say we create a new customer that's got 5 items in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do I filter those galleries so that I could show one customer and see all the items that person had? Is that something that we could demonstrate maybe?
Absolutely.
Or is that
so
okay,
repeat that. So we could create a Power Apps app that would show just pretty much this data right here, right?
Yep. Like, we're going to have a customer that has a sale that has maybe 5 items.
Okay.
And how would we patch that? And how would we bring it into maybe from a gallery, how we would filter the gallery so that we could show that?
Okay. I'm going
For
to
some reason, it seems like there's a lot of it's, we talk about this a lot, and with folks, and I think it's the hardest thing for them to get their mind wrapped around. But once they get their mind wrapped around, man, they're gone. It's like it just changes everything in your trajectory for database programming.
Absolutely. In fact, I'm going to call this first project, I'm going to call this SharePoint app. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the SharePoint data. There it is. And so we have customer, and we do have sales. We'll bring those two in. And so what I'm going to do is use a gallery, blank vertical gallery.
And as you're doing this, I just kind of want to encourage people. So Darren and I both now have done countless videos on this topic, countless videos. And you probably watched many of them, and there might be some of you that say, man, I still just don't get it yet. I just want to encourage you guys to just set up a couple tables and practice that. Just practice, because you learn it by practicing. And the more you do it, I know this stuff like the back of my hand now because I've had to do it so many times, right? And that's the reason why you just need to. This is a place where you need to develop muscle memory. It's kind of like if you guys ever shot baskets at basketball. You got to shoot that ball a few times, and then it turns into muscle memory, and you just start going. You don't even think about it. That's what you want to do with this. You want to be able to do this so much that you don't even think about it when you're building up, when you're patching your records, and when you're actually doing filters from that, So I said all that to say you learn this by doing, not by watching videos or listening to me and Darren talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this second gallery, I'm going to put in here sales. And look at that. We've got our Ford Mustang and a Chevy Silverado. Okay.
Yep.
And I've got a text box here, or text entry control. And what I want to do is I almost want whatever customer that we click on to be highlighted. So here I'm going to say color dot yellow if it's selected.
So now I'm going to probably butcher this name up. Is that Rajagopalan? Is that how you Rajagopalan? How do we set up a subtable in Power Apps? I'm not really sure what a subtable is to me. Maybe we're using some kind of terminology that I don't know about. I probably know what it is. I just don't use it as a subtotal. So, Darren, do you know what he's referring to?
They're probably talking about like an access. They call them subforms. It's the many side of a one-to-many relationship.
Okay, so that's what we're doing right now. We're setting this up. This is exactly, so you just got here at the right time then.
Yeah, absolutely. So
and I hope I didn't butcher your name up too bad.
Well, what I'll do is I'll add a button here and put it to the side. And we'll say bye. So I clicked on myself or whatever customer I'm working with. I go in here and I'm going to say a Dodge Viper. That sounds like fun. Dodge Viper. And when I click this button, I want a new item to be added here. Okay. So I'll go into this buy here and I'll patch the sales table. And it's going to be a new record. So we're going to say defaults. And also make sure that this is big enough for everyone to see. Right.
So if you're fairly new to, if you've been working with forms, or you're fairly new to Power Apps, when he's using a patch command here, a patch function, it's got 3 parameters. The first one's going to be your data source. The second one is going to be the record pointer, the record pointer to your data source that you're going to check, you're going to patch. In other words, for the data that you're going to change. When he said defaults in that second parameter, it's actually putting in a blank one. It's saying we're going to go to a new record pointer. And it's gonna put blank. When it says defaults, it can put anything that you put in the business rules. It's gonna put those default values in there for you. That's why they call it defaults. So it's gonna be a blank record with the default values that you have established, or the constraints that you have established in your database table. And then the third parameter is going to be, and you'll see there's curly brackets. That always is a sign. If it's delineated with curly brackets, that's almost always a sign that that's a record. Okay, so you know that that's a record that you're going to deal with. And a record means it's going to have a comma-separated list of fields and values. And you see he's got title, colon, that's the field. And then the next thing is going to be the value. And he has to have a comma there if he's going to have more than one field in that. And of course, you close it with your right curly bracket. So you have 3 parameters in a patch. You have your data source, the record pointer, and then the list of fields that you're going to change. You don't have to. You can have 15 fields in there and change only 2 of them. You don't have to address each one of them, but you must put a comma after the end of that. Now, the last one doesn't have a comma. That's your syntax. Now, patch also, one more thing I want to say about patch, and he's going to show you this in a second. Patch is going to return a record. It's actually going to return the record pointer, the reference. So, and he'll be showing you that at some point here.
Yeah, so if we create a new record, you can see it's going to be a new record because we're using defaults here. So if I want to put that into a variable, we'll say update contact. And we always recommend using a context variable almost all the time, unless you've got a good reason to use a global using the seg.
Yeah.
So here we'll just say LOC record is going to be whatever is returned by that patch.
Now, I do want to say one thing about your LOC record. He names that LOC record because he does that everywhere. Whenever he does a record to it, he calls it LOC record. He calls it the same thing all the time. It's consistent. We talked about consistency earlier on. He consistently calls that LOC record. It's just automatic for him. And that way he always knows that that's going to be the record that was just recently patched. He knows that. Or grabbed from the gallery. Lihu Matthew, I don't know if I'm butchering that name up too. Will you not check if the car you want to buy is already available in the second gallery? Yeah, at some point, that's what you're going to want to do. That would be validation, right? We want to do some data validation. I think what I like to do, and I think what Darren's doing, is we just kind of set this thing up so we'll add a record. And then at some point when we're done with that, we get that functioning. Then we're going to do some validation within that too, you know. But yeah, you need to lock it down and do all kinds of validation within that. Absolutely. And then Dave Martin says, so is the case that whenever we have data from multiple tables, we use multiple galleries. In SQL terms, we can't do a join and bring data from the 2 tables into a single gallery, correct? All but we can. So you could do, it's a common practice to do a one-side gallery and then the multiple side gallery. It's actually a pretty good interface, right? Because it allows them to select the one side, what like in this case, the customer, what customer am I dealing with? And then I can see all the stuff that pertains to that customer. That's actually a pretty good deal. But we could, if we set this up in a collection, we could set up a join in it. We sure could.
Yeah, very good.
I think, Darren, you said something about virtual tables within SQL too, right? Or views.
Mm-hmm.
You could set up joins within that as well, right? If you knew SQL Server to go backwards.
Yeah. So yeah, you could do through a view. So Dave mentioned with SQL terms, yeah, you can do your join in a view or a store procedure within SQL Server. In Dataverse, you do have views that you can use. In SharePoint, you don't. And for the longest time, I would say, well, there's no real way of doing joins inside of Power Apps, but Kurt in his module within the accelerator program, he's got a whole module on collections. And man, he goes deep. He goes really deep in using collections. And he sort of goes away how you do these joins with collections. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But just to kind of put a period on the subject here, Dave, this is a really good way of displaying stuff. That one to many relationship where you have two galleries. I just think it's intuitive to the user, to have that two gallery set up,
And then Brock says, good morning, everyone. I know I asked on the school page, but how do I remove values from a collection once I copy the values to a new collection? Well, there is a function called clear that will clear out a collection. You could do that. You could use remove if. I mean, yeah, almost anything that you could do to a data source, you could do with a collection as well.
Maybe one of these days, one of these Saturdays, we need to have a live stream on collections, and all the hoops that you can jump through with it,
Absolutely. I like that. Maybe even a workshop.
Maybe a workshop. I like the workshops. If you guys haven't been in our workshops yet, we're having a lot of fun with them. We just started doing this. We're doing this on a regular basis on Fridays. So you go into the school environment, you look, there's always going to be a new topic of it every week. I'm hoping that that's the way it's going to get. And we started this thing off, and we're getting a little bit better every week. It's becoming pretty cool now, where we're starting to get more interaction with the people who have joined the workshop. And we're putting some challenges in there in the workshop so people can kind of practice and stuff, and then we can talk about it. So it's a lot of fun. And so I want to encourage you guys to come in there and do that. Now, here's the other thing I want to say about workshops real quick, Darren. I know you want to go somewhere with this, but I think it's real important to talk about this a little bit. Oftentimes we have a workshop topic, and let's say we're talking about, I don't know, point of sales. We're going to do a point of sales today. And you think, well, I'm not going to do a point of, I don't care about point of sales. I don't do any kind of work with point of sales. I just don't care about that. So I'm not going to go into it. But I want to say, I want to poo-poo that notion a little bit, because in that point of sales, we talk about a lot of stuff like this. We talk about that point of sales. I don't care if it's point of sales or approvals or whatever it is. They all deal with records and how to process those records, how to do lookups, how to do filters, how to do searches, how to do all kinds of stuff. So you're going to be learning a lot of things underneath that. So I want to say, come to our workshop, even if you're not planning on doing a point of sales, because there's going to be something in that workshop that you're going to use in this current program that you're working on right now, no matter what that program is. So remember, people pay big money for this.
Sometimes when you say things, Kurt, it needs to be pointed out, like, hey, listen up. That was important right there.
That's true. And the workshop is going to give you practice. It's going to give you a different angle on how to look at it. And sometimes some of you, especially the accelerator students that are here today, you guys have heard myself and Darren drone on and on and on and on about lots of different of the same topics. But it seems like every time we present it, we give it a little bit of a different twist, and so you're going to get a little bit different perspective every time, And I guess finally, I want to say about those workshops. I sound like a Kirby vacuum cleaner salesman here, but I'm not trying to be. Honestly, I'm not. I really believe in this. I'm excited about it. I think it's going to help a lot of people. And the other thing I want to say about this is it's super affordable. I mean, we wanted to price this thing down so that people could just get in here easily without breaking their bank. We want people to be able to come in here regularly and to get this. We try to, Darren and I, obviously money's kind of important because it kind of keeps the ship running. But more important than the money is we just love to empower people. We learned this, and we believe in this. Like when we say we learn Power Apps, or we learned the database stuff, and it helped us. And we know that you guys are out there trying to do the same thing. We just want to share this knowledge, and we're excited about it. So I think it's a great thing, this workshop, and I hope to see you guys there. Really, I do.
Yeah. So we'll be doing one each Friday afternoon. So the one we did just yesterday afternoon was about data, which is why it's fresh in our mind and why I wanted to talk about it here in the live stream. Now we went through a lot more details, all the normalization database rules. We went through Kurt's example, trying to straighten that out, and then also what was the other example that we did, Kurt? We really delved in
Well,
deep.
we had a person from England who was getting ready to present some stuff. I guess their group is working on a project, and we discussed with that some potential stuff on what to think about in creating that project, and it actually gave her a lot of new insight that she hadn't thought about. So it was very helpful for her. I think it was. She seemed like it was very helpful, and she's going to be able to bring that to the table to her group, and come from a different perspective. So yeah, we talked about that. It was pretty cool. We had a lot of good subjects that we got into.
Yeah, and these workshops are you can get them on demand at a cheaper rate. So if you missed it, you can get it for $25. You know, and that was, I believe, it was a good 4 hours. We stepped through a lot of good material,
Yeah.
and the students that attended that walked away knowing all of the database normalization rules,
Yeah.
so that they can create
Yeah,
order out of the business chaos.
I feel like that was such an important primer on database, just to get fresh, to learn how to do this stuff from the beginning,
Yeah. And so we do have a question here from Tassie. I have one question. What's the difference between a lookup column and foreign keys?
We're going to
How
get
would you
there.
answer that?
We're
Huh?
going to show you that.
Yeah.
A lookup column itself, the name itself is not, there's no difference. It's really just a foreign key, Tassie, but it's handled a little bit differently in Dataverse versus in SharePoint. And it's a little bit more powerful, I think, in Dataverse than in SharePoint. And I think Darren's going to hopefully have time to show you, to demonstrate that.
Yeah. Yeah. So we could have used a lookup column over in SharePoint, but I don't recommend that you. I think lookups are sort of a bad thing within SharePoint, but they're a good thing in Dataverse. And the reason why is it was the one in Dataverse was designed for use for Power Apps, where the lookup column over in SharePoint's been out there for like 2 decades. And then over in SQL Server, you don't have a lookup column. It would just be called a foreign key. So the foreign key, you have a foreign key in all 3 places, but how you go about it, within SharePoint or within Dataverse and within SQL Server is different.
I'm sure glad you brought that lookup in SharePoint up, because I forget we even have it because I never use it. It's in my world, it's don't use it in SharePoint. That's where I go, but definitely use it in Dataverse.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Be right back there.
Okay. Okay. So we used an example here. So we've got customers. Okay. We had a place to type in the name of a car, and then we patched the sales table. So you see we have Dodge Viper down here. Now, what we could show, probably need to zoom out a little bit here. We could add in a label that shows, well, there's the ID. What about the customer ID? Okay. So over here, we could say this item.id. So that's the customer ID. And we could splice in a little dash here. Okay. And you see Darren is number 1, Kurt's number 2. Then over here, you can see, well, Darren bought 2 cars because there's a 1 here and there's a 1 there. Okay. So this is showing how to do this in SharePoint. Okay. Now, if we were to, let's go ahead and it is saved. So I'm going to do a save as. Okay. And we'll actually call this Dataverse app. And I'll show you how to do the exact same thing, but using Dataverse. Okay. So I'm going to go over to the data sources and I'm going to remove these two. And at first, you're going to see a bunch of errors. And I'm going to go find, I think in Dataverse, we called it something a little different, if I'm not mistaken. Let's go in and do a search for customer.
What I miss?
We have example customers. And then we'll go in here and look at sales. Okay, so we have these two tables. Okay, now over here for the data source, I'm going to say example customers. And let's fix the case of the measles that we have here. Now in Dataverse, we're not looking at an ID, an auto number. We're going to be looking at example customer, which will have a GUID. And then over here, we've got a name. Okay, so if I make this larger, there's the customer ID and there's the customer name. Okay.
Yep.
And then down here, instead of sales, well, it actually will be called sales. That's the exact name of it. And then for these labels, instead of title, we'll look at name. And then over here, what are we going to look at? Customer ID. What about customer lookup? That's the beauty within Dataverse, having a lookup column like this. Then we can look at the customer's name, or we could go look at the ID if we wanted to.
The whole record. You got the whole record there. I want to make sure people understand that. That's the beauty of that lookup. When you say customer.lookup, you're not looking at a field. You're looking at the entire record there. And you can select, and you'll see in the IntelliSense, all the fields of that record are right there. It's pretty neat stuff, man.
It is neat.
Especially like if you're out there working on it and you're doing some filtering of some data. What's that field I'm working with? It's right there.
Yeah.
So nice.
Now, the only thing that we need to change here is how we patch the data. Okay, so we are patching the sales, creating a new sales record. We have car to buy. Now, we don't have a title column, but we do have a name. Okay, so let's put that in name. And instead of customer ID, we have a customer lookup.
Yeah.
Now, the lookup column should be the record that we're pointing to.
Yep.
So instead of looking at an ID, we'll just say, hey, whatever record is selected in that gallery.
That it's important to understand the gallery,
Yes.
the gallery object control, the dot selected property is the record that you're currently on. It's the record pointer when you say dot selected. Because if you say dot selected, you go dot after the selected, you're going to see every field. So if you say dot selected, that's the entire record pointer, and it puts it into that lookup because the lookup wants the entire record. And that's that GUID. What they do when they put in that the table name, they have a field with the same name as the table. That's what it's referencing. It's saying go to that record that's right there, and you're going to see the entire record there. I also want to point out real quick, Darren, the name and the title. So title is a name is a field name that's being put in automatically by SharePoint. And name is, although you can change it, it's essentially the same thing. I want to suggest don't change it. I don't change it. I just use it. I let it be name. It wants to put name there. I let it put name there, just like SharePoint likes to put title there. And then just learn how to use that so that it makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that dot selected, that's the only difference right there.
All right. So Darren still wants his Dodge Viper, and there's no Dodge Viper down here. So I'm gonna
kind of making me want a Dodge Viper now.
You're trying to what?
You're kind of making me want a Dodge Viper now. I'm thinking, gosh, I want one too.
Nope, Darren bought it. There's only one at the dealership.
Okay.
So guys, we've looked at how to patch a one-to-many relationship in SharePoint and now Dataverse. What about SQL Server?
Yeah. Let's see. We got Mark says a light bulb went on yesterday's workshop. Good deal. Good deal. That's the whole goal right there, is that to get that aha moment, right? Where you go, oh, and then life just becomes different. And then Patty says the workshops are awesome, regardless of the subject, well worth the price and the information. Yeah, I agree. And thank you, Patty, for that. That's and then Michelle, I want to join the workshops, just haven't been able to, but the accelerator program has been my lifesaver. Absolutely. That accelerator program, it's just working out really well. We're building a great big network there, and everybody, it's just fun learning, and it's very productive. Let's see. Patty says, I've never used a lookup in SharePoint. Too many issues patching back to the SharePoint. And you know, Patty, she's a pretty experienced SharePoint user too. So, and then Tess says, thank you.
In the issue that you'll find out that you have, even you know, if you do make that lookup column work within SharePoint, is when it comes time to filter based on that, you might have to say .email or .id and try to match it up with, and then boom, you got a complex type, which means you know, again, SharePoint, it's not delegable. So now you got delegation issues.
Yeah.
So that's yet another reason why not to use a lookup within SharePoint here. So I'm going to say MS SQL Server app. Just look how to do it in all three places here. So now I'm going to remove this and remove that. Okay. Now I'm going to go add a SQL Server connector, and hopefully I have it all configured. And it should be red. Yeah, red SQL Server. And there's student 01. Okay, let's connect to it. And we've got customer and we've got a sale. Okay, so those two things will be added over there. I'll click on here, and instead of example customers, it will just be customer. Okay, now let's fix something in the label here. Now we actually have an ID. And where do we store the name? Oh, we've got first name and last name. We'll put a little space in there. This item, that last name. Okay. I'll save it. I'll run it. And perhaps, Kurt, we didn't put any data in here. Okay. So if I right click on customer, let's see what we've got here. If I go to table view, I'm going to get rid of the properties window here and look at the Object Explorer. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and say, edit the top 200 records. And we could just go in here and say, Mr. Nice. And oh, my ID is 5,000. And Professor Kurt. Oh, and Kurt, you're 505. 5,005. So that data is in there now. We'll exit out of that. Okay. So I just added that those two records. So I'm going to just refresh this to make sure this is all working right. Okay. Now down here on this gallery, it won't be sales. It will just be simply sale. And we're going to look at what do we have here? We have the item purchased. Okay. And then over here, we've got customer ID. And then when we patch it, it can be sale instead of sales. And we go at item purchased. And we've got customer ID. Now, this is sort of like how we do it in SharePoint. We go get the ID. Okay, it's not going to be a lookup column. Okay. And I'm going to save it. I'm going to run it. Kurt, I'm going to help you out here, man. You're going to get a Viper today. How about
Okay,
that?
thank you. Thank you.
And then I'm going to take your Chevy Silverado
You can have it.
since you don't want it anymore. Look at that.
Well, yeah, go take it now that I put a new starter in it.
So guys, you've seen us create tables in SharePoint, in Dataverse, in SQL Server, a one-to-many relationship in all three places. And, you know, we showed you how to set up the relationships, and we've showed you 3 different apps of working with those in those 3 different ways.
Yeah.
Is that not cool or what?
I like it. One of the things, if we could,
Mhm.
can we add in your SQL Server? I guess I just want to I want to demonstrate, because you created a constraint in there where you're going to do increment of 5 in there.
Mhm.
So I want people to see how seamless, now that you've created that in the back end, you go over to Power Apps and you add another customer. What's that going to do? How's that going to increment that? Let's see what that
Okay.
does.
So let's add a new button here on the left side. And then let's bring this gallery down a little bit. Okay. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, get rid of this, get rid of that. And let's say add customer. And I think I'm going to move this up and down, this up. You know me, I'm a sucker for
Oh, it's just terrible.
messing around with the UI.
Oh my goodness.
I can do that all day, Kurt.
Oh my goodness.
All right, TXT customer name. Okay. And let's create a Shirley girl. And we'll add Shirley girl as a customer. How are we going to do that? We're going to do a patch on customer. And we'll say
Isn't this
default.
hard, guys? This is just so hard, isn't it?
It's not hard. All right.
I thought development was supposed to be hard.
Code is hard. And
I mean, it's code, but it's not really hard code, is it? It's not hard once you see it. You know, 2 plus 2 used to be hard when we were kids. Of course, for me, it's still hard. But it's, you know, now we think 2 plus 2, we don't even think about it anymore, right? It's always hard when you're first starting, but once you practice a little bit, it's not hard.
Yeah. So I got a text box where they can type in a name, but for first name, we actually set it up properly in SQL Server to be granular there. So what we could do is we could split this out.
There you go. Now we're getting hard.
Based on a space. If we find a space in there, we're going to split it out. And then we're going to go look at the first one. Dot value.
And this needs to be a workshop, Darren. String manipulation. String manipulation needs to be a workshop. There's so much you can do with it, and you can make this thing really complicated or very easy.
True. Last name.
There's a little bit of string manipulation going on right here. This is what he's doing. Yeah. Of course, we're going to have to talk about the split function now, because some of you out there are probably going, split.
So if we got somebody's name, Shirley, give me a good middle name for a Shirley girl.
Shirley Sue.
Sue.
Shirley Sue girl.
Now, what's going on here, guys? When I say split, we've got a string, and we're going to split this up. We're going to slice it and dice it.
Yep.
And where we're going to slice it is the spaces. We gave split a second parameter of just a space. So it's going to slice it on the spaces, and it's going to give me the first one of those 3. Now that we sliced it on the spaces, we're going to get Shirley because we went with the first one. And then the last one is girl. And effectively, we're just going to ignore the middle name or anything in between.
Or we could get slick and get that middle name by taking the first of the last two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And put the middle name in the last name.
Yeah. If you
Now,
want
if
to
we're
get
really slick, we would have created a middle name over here in our database schema,
sure.
right?
No, but I'm saying we could pull it out by accessing the first one of the last two. You could do a nested function in there to get to that middle, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the ID is automatically created. I think that's where you were going, right? You wanted to see how these IDs were created.
Yes.
Since we created that in SQL. So let's go ahead and add Shirley Girl here.
Okay. Look at that.
She's 5,010.
And that was that constraint that he set up back there because he wanted to do increments of 5, and you'll notice he started at 5,000. That was a constraint, and it automatically put it at 5,000, but he put that in by hand. But this was done. Shirley Girl was put in by the Power App. So again, once you have that back end set up with all of your, we call them constraints or business rules, you got your tables all set up. It's all seamless here. It doesn't matter. Power Apps, it looks like you could be doing this to Dataverse. You could be doing this to SharePoint. You could be doing this to SQL Server. It's seamless. I love it.
Yeah. Now, Kurt, what if we got the IDs of the customers over here, but why on earth would we just display an ID? We probably want to pull in the customer's name. We don't want to look at their ID here.
Right.
So what would we do here in this label to pull in? So Dataverse, we just say customer dot.
I'm thinking you could do a lookup, do dot lookup dot.
So we'll do a lookup on the customer. And this is like your where clause, where the ID equals that.
Yep.
And then we could look at the first name. But now we need to do a lookup for the last name. That seems a little inefficient, doesn't it?
It does seem to be that way, doesn't it?
So instead of doing a lookup twice, I'm going to get fancy on you here. You guys ready for this? To simplify our code, we could use a with. Okay. And a with takes two parameters. One will be all these different monikers that we want to create. Okay. So here I'm going to say the customer record.
Now, wait a minute.
Huh?
Moniker. What is a moniker?
A label, a name. Oh. So I'll put the lookup.
Darren's he's full of these big words. He's got entities, he's got monikers, he's got stuff.
And you get fancy when we pluralize a word, indices. You get fancy there. You pull out words I've never heard of.
I know. But now we got this with here too. So we've used split, we've got with. Now, incidentally, I've got a PPC video on with that's pretty awesome, I think. But
really?
But the with is really nothing but an update context. If you understand variables, if you understand update context, it's really nothing but an update context with one more parameter. It's got 3 parameters. That's it. It's an update. You look at the whole anatomy of an update context. It's the same thing, just got one extra parameter in it, and that extra parameter is the code that you want to run underneath that.
Absolutely. So now we could just say we could use this moniker that we created up here, customer record.
The moniker.
And instead of doing a lookup twice, customer record dot first name, customer record dot last name. Now, if I was smart, I would have said something like custrec, so I wouldn't have to type so much down here. But we've simplified our code a little bit here.
Yep. And actually, I've not seen the deep dark recesses of Power Apps, what's underneath the hood there. But I want to say, dare I say, that we probably made our program more efficient because it's already resolved the issue and stored the issue. The issue resolved the reference to it. It stored it one time. In other words, if you say, I want to go to that table, it's got to go, what table? It's got to go to a memory address somewhere out there and search for this and put it and then find that and then put that into a register. So if you put that in a with variable, it's already found it. It's already found it. So it doesn't have to go out there 3 times. It just does it once, you know.
Very good. So I'm pretty happy with what we accomplished here today. You know, we've looked at the 3 data sources that are used and how things are different between the 3. I have a special little video for you guys you might want to check out. Every once in a while you guys will hear us talk about the accelerator program, and I get a lot of questions about that. So I want to throw in this little excerpt here to sort of break things down a little bit. Enjoy this. Has been the key ingredient for the hundreds of people that we've helped dominate in their organization. With this one skill, you're able to simplify processes for countless tasks, like tracking leads, doing inspections, logging attendance, booking desks in a shared office, generating reports, tracking employee performance, and the list goes on. If you have a project that you need to get done, or you're an IT professional or a developer, or if you plan to eventually do some freelancing work with Microsoft Power Apps, I am literally the only person you need to accomplish your goals. Spreadsheets and all the old ways of doing things are becoming redundant, and the people who are able to build Power Apps are going to accelerate their professional career so much faster than everyone else who's okay being average. I have over 20 years experience as a software developer and have been working in Power Apps for over 3 years. We have lots of course material for you, but if you're eager to accelerate your expertise with Power Apps at a much faster pace and want to work directly with me, this is what me and my team are going to do for you. Number 1, we're going to figure out exactly what projects and skills you're working on and the overall end goal. Number 2, we're going to get clear on exactly what data sources are needed for your projects. If it's a particular project with a deadline, we're going to work with you to make sure that you meet that deadline. And number 4, we're going to work with you to make sure that you master the platform. So not only can you finish any projects that you're currently working on, but the projects that come up in the future. And you might want to take those skills and become a freelancer in the future. If that sounds like something that you're interested in and you want to expedite the process of being able to build apps that can literally be used for years, and you want to be an important asset to your organization and any future companies you work for, click the button below and we can have a 15-minute chat about what you're needing and how we can help. You know, I should really create a website at some point to answer people's questions, because sometimes, I've got a membership here on YouTube, and then if you go over to school, you'll see things about something called PPC workshop, the accelerator program. Kurt, what's up with this PPC thing? Like you mentioned that a little while ago earlier. What's a PPC? Sounds strange.
Yeah, for those that don't have it, and for those that do have it that are sitting out there listening now, we'd like to hear what you guys think about it. But this personal pocket coaching is what we call it, and it's a video in your mailbox every morning. That's the goal, and it's a beautiful thing, because what it is, it's just a few minutes here. You know, we talk like this thing right here that we talked about today. We spent an hour and a half, 2 hours in a live stream here. And, we cover things like we talked about the with. I did a with function on there. We've got right here, he's got the bouncing ball. We talk about this ball. So this animation, we cover that, but we do it in a few minutes. We try to anyway. Sometimes I get on about 10 or 12 minutes, but we try to get it done in a few minutes, but we try to get exactly into the point. And what it does is it builds you a reference. I think this is the best thing about it. It builds a reference. We get to the point. You don't have to listen to an hour and a half video to get to this one thing that you're trying to look at. You say, I need to do a with. Well, you go over here to the with, and within 3 or 4 minutes, you're going to have that with down. And it just shows that right there. So it's a great reference. After a year, think about this. If you've got this after a year of having it, you're going to have 365 videos right there. And I say this, I know I sound like a broken record, but programming isn't about having everything in your head, remembering all the functions. It's about knowing where your reference material's at. And how many times have you had to go out there on the University of Google and look for this stuff? And you can't find the right one, or you're looking for it. This way, you've got it all right here. It's yours. And so it's about building your reference material. It's about having a quick access to something if you got a quick question for it. And also, what Darren and I do is if you've got something that you're trying to learn or trying to know, throw it out there. We'll make a video on it, throw it in PPC, and we call it PPC, but personal pocket coaching. And we talk about everything in here. We talk about fundamentals. We talk about philosophies. We talk about we try to get into the technical aspects of things. So it's pretty neat.
Yeah, I was really impressed with your video about encryption. That's something you don't really hear about with Power Apps.
Right.
You want to say anything about this video?
Yeah. So I do want to say that this actually came from somebody from our Learn School environment, our Learn School thing. They wanted to know about ASCII, how I can convert ASCII so that they could do some kind of a simple encryption thing. Well, I created a video on how to create an ASCII table. And then I created a video on how to use ASCII to do encryption and how you would be able to store it and do some sort of encryption with it. So this is kind of nice to have because maybe you want to have like one login to your company to use this app, but you might have 50 people hitting this with that one company login. Well, now you can actually have a little simple login screen for your company that might have 50 people using the same login with, to get into Power Apps. And now you can kind of keep people up, you can do your roles and your management from that. So it was a simple one. It was fun. And a lot of people got a kick out of it, I think.
Yeah, lots of good stuff in here.
Yeah, we got encryption, we got animation, we're talking about searches and filters, lots of database stuff, lots of gallery stuff, just little cool tricks and tips that we get. I like to call them pro tips.
By far, the most popular one that you've created, Kurt, is the bouncing ball.
Isn't that so funny?
It is.
But you know what? I think it's an important one though, Yeah,
it is. All right. So, the burning question in everyone's mind is, what video should you watch next?
And YouTube thinks you're going to like this video next. Let's see if they're right. Or you can select this playlist, which I've selected for you based on the content you're currently watching. Guys, gotta hurry. Click one of them. Otherwise, YouTube's going to autoplay some other video.